This is Secret Mom Hacks, episode 2. My name is Krista, and I am your host. Now, we are smack dab in the middle of talking about my birth story. So, just to help us get to know each other a little bit better, go back and listen to episode 1, where I share just part 1 of my journey, giving birth, being pregnant, all of that. And moving on now here in episode 2, we are picking up with feeling a gush. And so in this episode, I'm going to take you from gush to that moment where that sweet, precious baby was placed in my arms. So before I do that, I do want to share that as we near the end of this particular episode, I'm also going to share kind of what it looks like when your birth plan gets derailed, because spoiler alert, mine sure did. All right. So before we get into the meat of today's podcast, I do want to say thank you for tuning in, Mama. As I said, my name is Krista, and I am your Secret Mom Hacks host. I am a first-time mom, and as I'm recording this, I am chasing around a toddler that no amount of Googling mom groups or what to expect when you're expecting books were able to prepare me for. There's a lot of stuff people don't talk about pregnancy, about the birth process, about just hashtag mom life in general. And as someone who was previously terrified of childbirth, I am here to help you pull back the curtain on all of it. Now, I will preface this by saying I am not a doctor. I am not an OBGYN. I am not a health professional. I am merely a mom, okay, with a capital M. So take everything I say with a grain of salt. I'm merely sharing my experience. If you do have key specific health questions, ask your health provider, ask your midwife, ask your OBGYN. They're going to give you the medical direction that you might be seeking. But I'm here to share my experience, share my story, and every now and then, as we move on in this podcast, it may get a little messy. We may share a little TMI, but that's why you're here, right? I mean, that's what I wish somebody would have done with me. I have learned a lot in the trenches being a mom with a capital M. So my goal is you will leave every episode feeling refreshed, inspired, and hopeful, knowing that you are not in this mom journey alone. And we have a lot of subject matter to cover. When it comes to mom life, we're going to leave no stone why do I always mess that up? We are going to leave no stone unturned. All right, moms. So let's get back into business. Let's get back to the story. So at the beginning of episode 1, or excuse me, at the end of episode 1, I left you with the gush. So what happened? I remember my sweet baby. She was due on July 17th. She was due July 17th, 2018. My water broke July 18th, and I had her on July 19th. And so let's talk about this gush. So what had happened, it was to the point where laying in bed, sleeping, it was not comfortable. And quite honestly, it seemed like every second, every thought going through my head was, when is baby going to get here? I'm so ready to have this baby, just kind of anticipating all of these next couple of steps, in this birth journey. And so I had gotten up because at that point, it was like I had to go to the bathroom every 10 minutes, it felt like. So I had gotten up, went to the bathroom, and this was at like 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, something like that, on the 17th, which was the original due date. And then I remember going back, laying back down in bed, and I was laying there just thinking, like my mind reeling about how just excited I was to meet baby. And as I was laying there, I remember all of a sudden, I just felt this release down there, I guess you could say. And truly, I remember thinking, you just went to the bathroom. Did you just lose all bladder control and pee on yourself? And, so I remember like just trying to clench everything really tightly. And I like got up, sure enough, the bed, my side of the bed was like wet, and I like ran to the bathroom and sat down, and I remember just seeing even more stuff just running out. That's all I will say. And so indeed I was like, I'm pretty sure my water had just broken. So we call the birthing center, we talk with one of the midwives, and she was asking me if my contraction, had anything else happened besides the water breaking. Nope, no other signs of anything. So they were like, okay, why don't we go ahead and have you come on in, and we're going to just let you be close by, because now that your water is broken, you're kind of on a time clock here. We need to at least get contractions started, because if your water is broken for too long before the baby comes out, an infection could set in, which of course nobody wants that. So we get on over to the birth center, and I remember they started hooking me up to IVs. And by the way, as someone who was previously terrified of needles, not gonna lie, even as a grown adult, I would go to the doctor's office, get whatever shot, and I would have to have someone hold my hand, even as an adult. So anyway, once you become pregnant, you become pretty much used to all the pokes and prods and the needles. So anyway, they hook me up, they put this IV in. I'm walking around with the little bag I can't even remember what it is that they maybe it was, I don't know. I was hooked up through some IV, walking around the birth center with my bag of fluids, medicine. Forgive me for not remembering at this point what it was that they were injecting me with at that point in time. But so anyway, at this point, it was a waiting game trying to get contractions going. So because my water had just broken within the last hour or so, they were like, go eat breakfast, try to rest a little bit. This is still very early in the morning. And so no sign of a single contraction, nothing, truly feeling nothing at all. So they were like, we really need to get some contractions going. You can go walk around the mall. And keep in mind, this is in the middle of summer. They were like, you can go walk around the mall. That would be good because it's air conditioned. They told me about some concoction. I can't remember what this recipe is. I'm sure if you Googled contraction concoction, maybe this recipe would come up, but I remember it was the most foul smelling and tasting thing that they had me drink to, again, attempt to get some contractions started. And let me tell you all, between that concoction I drank, between walking around the mall, there were all of these things happening that it took hours to finally make anything happen. So finally, contractions start. We are trying to increase the contractions now, right? Because again, my goal is I'm having this baby in the birth center. So we were kind of bouncing on a ball. We were, doing all of these number of things to get my contractions going. And I just remember being in this birth center room. It was so beautiful, so relaxing. Truly, Baby and Company truly was a wonderful place to work with. They made me feel so comfortable. And anyway, I just remember contractions finally getting going. I don't know what it was. I'm sure it was a combination of things, just like it was in episode 1, talking about the different things I had done to turn baby breech, with the contractions. I'm sure it was a combination of things that was finally getting things going. But we were trying, of course, to just increase the speed and decrease the time between contractions, right? Because that's the goal. The harder and more intense and shorter the contractions are, the quicker it is that you're going to meet baby. And so, guys, I labored and labored and labored for hours. And then it finally got to the point, that Baby and Company had a a toilet with a heated seat on it. That is life-changing. Can we just talk about how amazing that is? I labored in a tub of warm water. That was beautiful. I mean, they did so many things to just help keep me comfortable and keep the contractions going. And it finally got to the point where my water had been broken for too long. And my water had been broken for too long. The contractions just weren't coming fast enough. And one of the midwives comes in and she tells me, Krista, I think we might need to transfer you to the hospital. We think it's just time to meet baby. It's time to get her out of there. And, we just don't want an infection to set in, and we want to get this baby here as healthy as possible and safely as possible. And so of course that's exactly where my head was and what I wanted and still want to this day. If and when I do have another child, should that become the plan. But anyway, I remember internally there was just this little moment of sadness that I was like, oh, my birth plan is changing. I really wanted to deliver at this birth center, and now they're telling me I'm going to have to go to a hospital. Does this mean I'm going to have an emergency C-section? And I asked them that. I said, is it still to the point? Is it too far gone now that we're going to have a C-section? And they said, not quite yet. When you get to the hospital, they can give you some Pitocin, and, there may be some things there they can do to help resemble as close as possible to what your birth center experience would have been. But the good news is, if you're there in the hospital and you do need to have an emergency C-section, everyone is there and all of the pieces are there that they would need to make that happen. And so I just remember feeling assured in that moment, thinking, okay, while I'm a little sad that my birth plan now has basically gotten derailed, that it's changing, how exciting is it though that soon I'm going to get to meet this baby? I don't know when, but I know soon. These doctors, these nurses, they are going to give us great care, and very soon we're going to get to meet baby. And so I remember being driven to the hospital, and it was so great because it was kind of like we were in a little motorcade. One of the midwives, turns out she worked at the birth center and the hospital, which was really cool. So all the people at the front desk, when this midwife/nurse walked in at this hospital, they knew her, and they knew, oh, she's with Baby and Company. She's got a mom in labor, and we need to get her into a room ASAP. So truly, from the birth center to the hospital, it was maybe like a 10 or 15 minute transition period. It was so fast. They had a wheelchair waiting for me. At this point, I was in so much pain, and I was just ready to deliver this baby by whatever means. At this point, I had gone from, I don't want to have a surgery, I don't want needles, I don't want any of that, to stick the needle in me and give me the epidural and let's get this baby out of there. I remember being taken up to my room and being put in the bed, and I just remember sticking my back out and just telling the nurses, let's go ahead and do this. I'm ready to meet my baby girl, and just stick the needle in me. I don't want to feel the pain any longer. To all you mamas out there who have birthed naturally, oh my goodness, kudos to you, because birth pains are something unlike anything you will ever experience in your life. All you mamas know that. And so anyway, when I got that epidural, I was in such a happy place, and was just ready for the next step. And let me tell you something else. Because I don't think I mentioned this in the first episode, I hired a doula, which is one of the smartest things I could have done. And if and when I do go through this process ever again, I will so hire a doula, because they really help you just stay focused. They help to kind of be a liaison between you and your midwives or your nurses and doctors or whatever. And they just help you to feel centered and calm, and, to just stay mindful of what you're going through. They help to create a calm a calm environment. And she did that. Guys, it was so neat. She actually brought little string lights that she hung up around my hospital room, the delivery room, and she was able to kind of dim the lights in there, so it was just the string lights, and it was very nice. Had a different ambiance than your, typical fluorescent ceiling lights. So that was really, really nice. And then she just held my hand and was there to let me know that everything is going to be all right, and that, the doctors and the medical team, that they're looking out for our family. So, and what was so great, again, anytime I had a question or I needed something, I could tell her and she would run right out, as opposed to pushing the button 20 times, which I know doctors and nurses, I know they love that when all of the patients push the buttons because they need something. But anyway, that was one of my best decisions throughout my pregnancy, was hiring the doula, so that on the day of the birth, she was there to just help me keep my mind right, help me stay on track with everything. So anyway, got to the point, I was in the hospital. They were monitoring baby's heart rate. And again, these contractions were just going up and down. They were being so inconsistent, and I can't remember how long I labored in the hospital. I should have been taking notes, but who's really thinking about that, right? When you're going through all of this, especially the first time. But I remember when I had gotten to the hospital, they had said, you've got just X number of hours for us to labor and attempt to deliver like this before we have to consider some alternate options, which I knew that was code for before we would have to consider a C-section. So I kind of had that in the back of my mind that, like, this could happen. Anything could happen. And so Krista, don't just think that that's not an option. Like, you are to the point where now truly they may have to do an emergency C-section for you to meet baby. So anyway, it finally got to the point where I'd labored and labored. Baby's heart rate was going, in addition to the contractions just staying irregular, her heart rate was starting to kind of go down as well. So that was certainly another concern. So finally they came in, and I could just kind of tell the looks in their eyes. They were like, okay, we have tried, and you have tried, and you have tried so hard. You have given it your all, but what we want is to deliver a healthy baby, and we don't want an infection to set in. And so it is time to go to the operating room. It's time for the C-section. It is time to meet this baby and get her out of there. So I just remember being nervous, but also thinking, yes, I'm finally about to meet this baby. As scared as I am to go through this process, because I've never had a major surgery before. Friends, the only surgery I've had, knocking on wood now as I'm sharing this, the only surgery I had previously was getting my wisdom teeth out. Okay, that is no comparison to anything like this major surgery. So anyway, I remember thinking, like, I was a little nervous and scared, but also now just so excited because I knew I was just a short amount of time from meeting sweet baby girl. So they give us a couple minutes, and they come in, they start kind of unhooking things from the room and start unhooking things from me from the room, and then they wheel me to the operating room. And I just remember laying in this operating room on this table. They put the hat on me, and they put the curtain over, and they started changing out some things in the IV. And I just remember all of a sudden feeling just so happy and so out of it. And it felt so good, I'm not gonna lie. But I remember being just so excited and ready to meet this little girl. So they hook me up, they get me all drugged up with all of the anesthesia and all of the things to where I can't feel anything. So I'm still very much awake and alert. I would say pretty alert, again, as alert as one could be when you're on drugs and you've been up for however many hours. At that point, I'd basically been awake for almost, it had been over 24 hours at that point. It was quite long. And Anyway, I remember starting to hear sounds and just hearing the doctors chattering. And then of course I could feel some pressure on my belly. I couldn't feel any pain. I just remember feeling pressure. And then I remember basically them saying, well, here she is. And next thing I know, I can kind of hear some little sounds and gurgles, and they walk on the other side of the curtain with this precious, sweet baby. And I mean, it was just completely magical to finally see this precious, tiny little human and look at her face and see that she's healthy. I counted all 10 fingers and all 10 toes, making sure there were 5 on each. Looking at her sweet little face and, making sure she had 2 lovely eyes and a perfect nose and 2 ears. And anyway, all the things that you're doing now as a new mom, just looking over this sweet little human that you've brought into the world. And so, of course, my first question was, when can I hold her? And they were like, well, we need to take her away and, do a few quick things, and they need to clean you up, but we're going to take you up to your room and you're going to get to hold her very soon. So of course I could not wait. At this point now too, I was just like running on adrenaline and so ready to see this baby. But they stitch me back up and they take baby girl away, and next thing I know, I'm like being wheeled up to my room. And of course, my family is there. My parents are there. We had some sweet visitors who just couldn't wait to meet baby girl. And so a little bit of time goes by, and next thing I know, they walk her into me, and I will just never forget what that feeling felt like when they placed her in my arms. And she was all swaddled in this little blanket, and I was of course still in my gown and looked like a hot mess at this point. Again, you mamas who have like your makeup done and your hair all done, more power to you. Could not say that that's how I looked at this moment in time, but none of that mattered to me. All I wanted to do was just stare into this precious little girl's eyes until I couldn't keep my eyes open any longer. And so that's kind of what I did. I was able to hold on to her for a little bit. And of course, then they had to take her away to go do a few more things, and they needed to do a few things with me in my room. And ultimately, I just needed to get some sleep. So that is the birth story. And so really the next most important topic that I feel should be covered would be latching, because as I think back to that time in the hospital and spending that first 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 10, 10, 12 hours with baby, I remember the next steps of all of that being starting to nurse. So that's going to be the next episode topic. When we get there, episode 3, we are going to cover latching and nursing, breastfeeding, all of that jazz. And I'm really looking forward to sharing that experience with you because, well, I'm not going to share any spoilers, but all I will say is that whole process is very interesting. And there are many eye-opening things that I wish somebody would have told me as I was starting that journey and starting that process. So that wraps episode 2. I just want to say thank you for listening. It was exciting to share my birth story with you. And, if anything too, I will say as much as my birth story is ingrained in my mind, I feel like it's also like these first 2 episodes are like the hardest to share just because there were so many moving pieces. So now that we have set the stage with this birth story, with my birth story, or my daughter's birth story, I guess you would say, my experience giving birth for the first time, I just want to say, if you are a mom, if you already have a baby or a little one in this world, or if you are a mom to be, regardless of where you are in your pregnancy journey, but I just want to say, I cannot wait to share some of the stories that I have learned, some of the lessons I have learned over the last almost 3 years now. So guys, I've been trying to get this podcast off the ground for a while, not gonna lie. So as of the recording of this episode, I have an almost 3-year-old, which is really crazy to say. So a lot has happened since we have experienced this birth story to today. So of course I'm raising a sweet little toddler now. She's sweet most of the time. 97% of the time she's really sweet. We have those moments. We all do, right? I'm really excited that I've gotten through sharing the birth story with you because I truly believe that has set the stage for this next string of episodes that we're going to cover. So I can't wait to talk about latching and nursing and breastfeeding and how I had to hire a lactation consultant. That is the only spoiler alert I'm going to give. All I will say is breastfeeding is not a walk in the park. Okay, so that's all I'm going to say on that. But I do want to say, I know that everyone's time is valuable, so I do not take it for granted that you have spent this time with me today. So thank you. And let's face it, it is hard to take care of those you love if you're not taking care of yourself, all right? So remember that. This is a gentle reminder to stay hydrated, drink that water, make time for a quick walk around your office, your house, your whatever. If it's 5 minutes, if it's 10 minutes, anything is better than 0 minutes, okay? Or if you can squeeze in that 30-minute activity that'll get your heart rate up and make you sweat, amazing. We always feel really good when we can make that happen, right? So that would be awesome. Get that heart rate going, sweat a little. Let's take some time for ourselves. Don't forget to wash your face. Slather on that great overnight moisturizer before you go to bed, and don't forget that sunscreen in the morning because your skin is going to thank you for that. Okay, so thank you very much for spending some time with me today. I will see you again on the next episode. And remember, until then, you've got this, mama.